Hey guys, Comic Boom here with a special guest, and it is not Jace from Comic Source, but rather it is my good friend Trevor Lenkiewicz, the writer of Area 51, the Helix Project, Minutes to Midnight, and Rise, which is a new superhero tale, all at Kickstarter. Trevor, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great, man. It's great to see you, and I'm glad to. I feel like I'm back in my old stomping grounds, man.
Yeah, for sure. I know Jason and I, we missed you when we were in. I went up to Phoenix Fan Fusion to see him there, and we had a great time. And we certainly had a couple of uh, we had a couple of whiskeys up there thinking about you. And I know that you wanted to make it down, but you're a busy guy. And one of the reasons why you're busy is that while Jason and I talk about comics, you're living the dream, my friend.
Yeah, it's I do
Yeah,
get the privilege of making the comics.
yeah. Well, that's I know that you've had a lot on the go in the last little bit. You've had we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking a little bit about Minutes to Midnight, but in particular, you've got this other project, Rise. Rise number one came out. It's at Kickstarter. Rise number two, I believe, next week is you're announcing the promotions for Rise number two. That's correct.
Yeah, so the pre-orders or the Kickstarter for Rise number 2 will go live on June 18th. So theoretically, it's after this, or it's yeah, theoretically it's right after this video drops, or maybe around the same time. But yeah, we're gonna have a lot of really cool limited rewards that you can get in on the ground floor, like some original art, some art commissions, all in like limited quantity, and even some discounts just for stopping by and backing the book on day one or day two. So it's after you listen to this, it's going to be worth heading on over to that Kickstarter page and clicking that green button.
Well, I got to tell you, as somebody who reviews DC Comics every week with Jason, I, I'm a selfish bastard, and I'm glad you've dived into the superhero genre, and
Mm.
Rise is something that review it. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I'm going to be talking about it now. And
Sure,
I'm going to suggest that if you don't mind, I'd like to give my unfiltered thoughts, uh,
sure,
untarnished by you, the writer. And
sure. Yeah.
as I go through it, and then actually, I got some questions for you as I go through this, because it's very interesting. Because I always, one of the things that I always say when I review a superhero comic book, and I can be quite harsh on writers when I do so, is that I'm a sucker for a good metaphor.
Mm.
And I can. There's nothing that frustrates me more when I get to an end of a story and I say to myself, "Well, what was the point of that?" And I
Mm.
can't think of a reason. I can't think, well, what's the theme? What's the metaphor? If there's no story here, at least tell me what the moral of this story was. What was the point of this? And one of the things that really stood out for me here is that it's quite obvious with Rise number one, that first of all, that you clearly have a message. And the first thing what I liked is, and I just, for those watching, Rise is some. Go to Kickstarter. I'll leave the link below. You have to check out Rise number one. If you're into superheroes, check this out. This is going to be a positive review. There might be some minor criticisms here. I mean, it is a review. I'm going to be a straight shooter. I can tell you that. But Trevor's going to give his perspective on it. But I got to tell you right off the bat, I love the variant covers. I love the variant covers, and we got cover A here. So actually, before I do that, Trevor, can you tell me something? Who is the artist on cover A? And
Yeah.
tell me about tell me about that process, and who is the cover on cover A here that everyone's seeing?
Yeah. So
Who's
cover
the
A was
artist?
done by our incredibly brilliant interior artist Ryan Best. He actually colored his own work on the cover as well, and we it was a little bit of an homage to a Francis Manapul Dark Side War Superman one shot. I loved the design language of that cover when it's like the black and white like anti-life Superman, and there was like a cool like geometric element and like the souls of the damned from like the pits of apocalypse like rising up around him. But the that cover and the language of that cover has stuck with me for a very long time. I think when I had gotten that, I was maybe a year or two into reading comics, and I talked to Ryan, and we actually have basically taken the language of that and spread it out across all of the A covers for the series. So they're all going to connect, which is really cool. But for me, you know, I think many of you, especially Rocky, will know, but many of you who have seen me before know I'm big on a cover being the first place where the storytelling gets going, right? And so there's always something narrative about my covers, even if they are sort of a strong, like simple, striking design like this. And so John, in over the course of these A covers, is going to be interacting with an artifact of masculinity, and it'll say something about his own in the process. So the eagle is sort of a representative of a journey in many Native American cultures, but also strength and fertility. And so here John is with a classic sort of bald eagle, very American superhero iconicity. And
Yeah.
this is a
And
beautiful piece. And the cool thing about it is that Ryan had originally done a version of this cover and was dissatisfied with it and churned out this beauty, which I could not be more grateful that I work with somebody who is so concerned and puts so much care into their work that they would be willing to just redraw a cover because they didn't love how it first came out. And we were all the better for it because I love this one.
well, I got to tell you, one of the things that I actually really like and that I don't always like on a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, I like the trade dress. I like the Rise trade dress. I like the eye. I like sort of like I like the fact that his symbol that is the central that is the central piece of his costume is right front and center. I got to give a shout out. You haven't mentioned him yet. I got to shout out to your colorist, Fabi Marquez. Did I say that right?
Fabi Marquez, yeah.
Fabi Marquez, because there's a lot of red on this cover, and yet it's very different tones of red, and it really just pops off the page. Now this is a digital copy. I haven't got Rise #1 yet, the physical copy, but this really pops off the page. Also, one of the things that I appreciated having read the story is that the eagle itself that was on the page is aside from symbolic of related to a hero's journey. I actually thought it was this kid's definitely American. I mean, it was impossible for me not to think of American. Maybe that's because I'm Canadian and we have an inferiority complex with you Americans, but that's what I thought of. But also the round shapes that the round shape that is behind the eagle is actually a symbol that is present throughout the entire comic, symbolizing the power set, directly related to the power set internally that gives this character, John, whose name, can I say his full name?
Yeah.
Jonathan Prufrock. Jonathan Prufrock, I got to ask you about that name. But anyways, there's so much here on the cover, and what every good cover does, what this does is, there's nothing better than when you read a comic that you flip to the cover again and you say, that's why that's there. Because if you didn't know better, you'd think, oh, this is just a way for the artist to sort of spice up the page. But no, there's actually a relationship. Because there's nothing more frustrating nowadays. I bitch about it all the time. There's nothing more frustrating than when you look at a cover, and I like when it's more than just a pose. It's that it's actually related to the content of the comic in some way. And this is, first of all, this is a first issue. It's an iconic image. It's a little bit of an homage, like you said, but in all the right ways. But you're also giving it something new. But somebody who hasn't read the comic yet doesn't fully appreciate the symbol of the eagle, and in particular the shapes behind the eagle, which we'll get to as there's going to be a few spoilers here, but Trevor's not, I'm under strict rules here. Obviously, I don't want to ruin the pleasure of new readers coming on and picking this up, but very well done. Very well done.
Thank you.
Second, the cover B here. Tell me something about this one. Who drew this one?
Yeah, it's by the amazing Steph C, who actually drew the first story in Minutes to Midnight. That was our first collaboration together. She drew The Marvelous Misadventures of the Melancholy Man. And we conceptualizing this cover, we had played around with a couple of different motifs, but I really wanted to capture Sort of the, I mean, there is a sexual element to this book because that's a major part of masculinity and a man's consideration of himself. And
And
so
by
you
the way,
have sort
I
of,
got some questions on the sexual parts of this book. I got to tell you.
sure. Yeah, yeah, sure. And so you sort of have his cape in these sort of abstract shapes, like rolling over and consuming him. And there's a shadow of a woman sort of having him enraptured in her. And it's just beautiful. Like I like, this is something I would hang up on my wall. It's gorgeous. It's striking. It feels like something that should be in an art gallery, if I'm honest. And it captures so much about this story with such a strong image. And I love it. This is like, I mean, this was my wallpaper on my phone for months. So
Yeah, and there's one thing that it's part of the story, uh, but it's sort of related uh, to how I when I came back and I said before about how one gets a better appreciation of these covers when you break down why they're like this, because it's very I find it fascinating that how you can give a concept to different artists and they'll come back and they'll give you completely different conceptions of a particular character, and you got a cover A and a cover B, and you think on the surface, boy, that you couldn't come up with something so completely different, and yet what the artists bring to the table here, because when I look at the first image and you got the iconic sort of classic, almost like Superman like image, and you got the eagle, which on the surface connotes maybe Americana, maybe a journey, and then you get to this one, there's more vulnerability in this one. There's a vulnerability here. It's almost like he's relaxed. He's being it's I'm not even sure what he's experiencing in this, but but this type of vulnerability, or this type of, what exactly is he feeling at this moment? I don't know. But you get a sense of that again, because you got different emotional layers in the first issue. You get a sense of that in the story as well. So again, I for those ordering copies of the covers here, you gotta, I guess, pick your emotion, pick your cover, basically. But no, again, well done. And I'm someone who bitches about covers and variant covers all the time. But I mean, if they're gonna be there, at least have some resonance with the story, and this does. So. And again, for those listening, I apologize. I'm doing a quasi-review as I'm interviewing the very writer. I don't get away with this very often. I'm taking advantage of my friend, Trevor Lenkiewicz. Thank you, my friend.
my pleasure.
So, I promise we're going to reach a point where you're going to be doing more of the talking than me, okay?
No problem.
All right. Cover C by Raymund Lee. Tell us what was the inspiration behind this one?
Yeah, so Raymond really, I mean, we wanted to go for a striking image. I had sent him the script and what I had of pages at the time. And what really captured him was this sort of climax of this first issue, when John is put into a situation where he is depowered and has to confront the hellscape of a burning building falling down upon this one woman. There's one person left in there. And knowing that he's depowered, it was sort of a major philosophical moment for this character, and the moment where he truly becomes a hero in my mind. And he did such a beautiful job at communicating, one, like the physical event that is happening, but also like the idea of like the burning building around him shaping like the wings of an angel. Like the fire is sort of meant to evoke angel wings, and you have the smoke in the form of the hands of the people that might have died or could die. You never know. People could still die. And
Do I have
obviously he's listening.
do I have your permission to show that image?
Yeah, please do. Feel free to show the page. Yeah, so it's just like this beautiful moment for me. And like, I mean, we obviously went with a predominantly silent page just to show this connective moment with this depowered superhero and this woman he's trying to save. And it's very emotional for me. But like, yeah, this cover was meant to sort of distill so much of what makes this scene so great into one iconic image. And I mean, like, Raymond just delivered an Alex Rossian level, like, painterly iconic cover. And I adore it. It's hard not to. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. And I've got I'll have more to say of just more to say about that scene, that what you describe as that pivotal moment where when John, I guess, crosses the threshold, or at least in your mind, becomes the hero. I viewed him as being a hero before that, but just maybe perhaps a hero in denial. This is where we might disagree, and I mean that in the nicest way, because whether you like it or not, now that you're a writer, my friend, you have no control over how I interpret your story.
Yeah. No, that's part of the fun.
That's exactly right. It's part of the fun. So it's always interesting sometimes when I get a writer's perspective. Well, usually it's when I'm reading interviews, not while I'm actually being the one giving it, that I realize, oh, I guess that's not what the writer intended, but I guess that's my headcanon. I like my interpretation better than the writer's, or I'm convinced. But in any event,
that's what makes you like it more. I'm all for it.
That's exactly right. Don't you love readers like me that tell you that you're wrong about your own story?
It's my favorite, actually.
Yeah. But in any event, okay. Before we get into the heart of the story, this is, I guess, is this cover D?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
this is cover D, and who's the artist on this one?
Yeah, we have Ivan Tao, who's just been absolutely crushing like the variant cover game. Like everybody and their mom like wants him on a cover. He's done stuff for a bunch of indie pubs for DC.
Speculators love him, Ivan Tao. You know, speculator alert, guys, listen up. Cover D, you might want to get this if you're an Ivan Tao. He does a lot for Dynamite lately as well. He had a couple for Dynamite, and his name is definitely out there.
Yeah, and so I mean, he's just like a joy. He's a lovely man to work with. He's so friendly, and I hope that one day he and I get to meet up at a con in the States. But we went with something like big and iconic, and took advantage of his. I mean, like what's great about him is like Ivan is so good at making a very simple composition striking and identifying the core elements of shape and form and color, and even texture to a degree, and making something pop. And so we wanted to go big and bold and superhero-esque. And we went very literal with the symbology, where he's carrying a flaming triangle, which is the Greek symbol for change, delta.
I was gonna ask you that.
Yeah, we had workshopped so many times, like, what do we want him lifting or hoisting? And we were like, well, we could get as literal as humanly possible, because there are so many different things about the story that actually play with Greek mythology and its relationship with masculinity, and some of those sort of visual telltales, and even going on in issue 2, particularly so. So we were like, let's just get unapologetic about it. And he's carrying a flaming symbol of change as he's hoisting over the city. And it's just, it's so identifiable, and shout out to my buddy Richard Fairgray, who helped me put together the trade dress and keep that logo from blocking it, because I was so petrified when I was putting the trade dress together for this cover in particular, because I feel like, because in composition it's so simple, every element matters, and I didn't want to cover any of it with the logo. It's like, it's just not going to make sense in my head. And he was able to help me go through like the layers of the file and put that logo in a place where you can kind of read it. But honestly, the art is always what comes first. I hate trade dressing because I never want to cover up anything important, and I'm glad we got to do that and let Ivan's beautiful cover show itself off.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it works. It works, and it actually has the feel of this. I think people who, longtime collectors like me, will know exactly what I'm saying when I say this. It actually feels like a cover D cover, because it's like we get cover A, B, and C that are all awesome, but we got the trade dress. But now this one, you're having, the more covers you have, the more fun you can have with it a little bit, and it's perfectly symbolic. You're rising above the very trade dress itself, rising above the city. I wasn't aware of the symbolism of the triangle. I learned something. I'm a sucker for a good metaphor, like I said. I love that. Now I love it even more. And of course, change is part of the story itself. This is, after all, a superhero story, and we're getting to know this John in this opening issue in terms of the struggles that he's going to have. So, without further ado, I mean, we're going to talk about at least probably the first, I would say, probably third of the comic, and I got to tell you right off the bat, I love the opening scene. I love the opening scene, and because I'm going to set this up. For people, if you're going to get annoyed at me, I don't care. I'm going to do a little bit of the talking at this moment because this is how I experience the scene. Because I see this guy. First of all, I love the fact that he stands out like a sore thumb. He's wearing red. He's wearing a bright red shirt. I mean, even in the entire panel, in the opening panel where there's a whole bunch of people in the scene, and kudos to Ryan Best, who's capable of actually drawing a crowd scene and make the main character stand out, obviously with the help of Fabi on the colors. But I love how he, I'm all I know is this guy with a bright red shirt shows up, removes a guy. He likes this girl, a guy sitting beside her. The guy won't move. He's watching the game, so he uses clearly some sort of superpower, super speed. That's all I know. And he moves the guy off the chair, and then he sits on the chair, and introduces himself. And she doesn't know what to make of him, but and then all of a sudden, I mean, this guy is. You got some. It goes. Now I don't know if. I'm assuming they don't know each other, and this is my impression. Now, maybe I'm wrong on this. I'm assuming they don't know each other. I'm thinking that this is like wholly passionate, love at first sight, or frankly, lust at first sight. That's how I saw this when I first read it. Was lust at first sight. She's sort of overwhelmed. She kind of, she's intrigued by him, and then boom, they find them. He finds himself. I mean, it's in the bathroom stall of the bar. They get it on, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, this is a guy who, because this is my preconception. I'm supporting the Kickstarter. This is supposed to be a young up and coming superhero, and I'm thinking to myself, this guy. My initial impression was this guy's not a Clark Kent. Are you kidding? This is, when's the last time Clark Kent did that with Lois Lane? I mean, so right away, this guy's standing out to me. He's not pissing around. Meek and mild? No, this guy's not that. So this is a guy who, right away, boom, he's having a great time, meets this girl in the stall, and this is where things get interesting. It looks like he's in the middle. They're in the middle of this sort of passionate, fling in a bathroom stall in a bar, and then out of the blue, they just finished having what I assume is quite a moment, shall we say, the big O. And then he immediately says, "I've got to go," because he picks something up with his super hearing, and that's very clearly those of us who it's thanks to the great lettering by Matthias Zanetti. Did a great job on the lettering. It was always easy to see when John was picking up somebody's crying for help. It was easy to see. But what really shocked me, I thought he was rude the way he just banged this chick and then boom, he left the bar. But she didn't seem to be upset. That upset. I thought, my God, but she says, yeah, I guess, you got to go save the world or something. So it didn't seem to bother her that this guy, she's clearly attracted to him. He comes, they do the nasty, they have a mutual big O at the same time. I mean, this guy knows what he's doing. All of a sudden he's leaving. And I'm thinking this guy's alpha male. This guy, this isn't the first time this guy's done this. This is what I'm thinking. But then I found my expectations subverted. Straight up. I was. Because as becomes clear in the story, I mean, he leaves the bar at super speed. I mean, and because, he leaves the bar at super speed and then he seems to lose some of his powers. He can't quite make it to the apartment. So clearly I pick up some limitation because he kind of reaches the top of the apartment building across the complex where there's some domestic abuse occurring. And the way that he can't, I was going to ask you about this scene because he clearly wants to help, but he doesn't want to cause more damage. He wants to speak to the person who is potentially going to harm his girlfriend. And I was really curious about that. And again, the lettering is so interesting because the lettering, he's speaking in red. It's like, so he's throwing his voice. And I got the impression that only this individual person could hear him speak, and not the victim, potential victim.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
yeah. I
Was
mean,
that the intention?
they well, they can both hear them, but yeah, he's like throwing and targeting his voice. Like it's like he's directing his voice toward them and toward the room. But he's obviously in a state of paranoia and thinks like their apartment is bugged.
Yeah.
Um, but
That he's
yeah,
hearing
and
things or something. Yeah.
yeah, like a part of also too, like one of the major things about this book that I wanted to consider was like adding a level of pseudophysics to limit the character and to limit like the ease of solvability. Like I wanted to see how somebody with these abilities could potentially solve these problems in a semi-real situation. Again, like emphasis on semi, but it's like he's like, yeah, if I there's a moment where he is like, if I jump, like I'm gonna fall through the floor. Like I'm gonna break everything. And so there's an element of practicality that actually becomes increasingly prevalent throughout the course of the series. Like when he does the superheroing, I never wanted it to just be simple. I wanted one to show that like there is a challenge, but two, that this character is actually overcoming problems. He's not Clark Kent where he can just kind of do anything all the time, right? Like even the simple things require his effort and his thought. And so I wanted that to speak a little bit to like how hard this guy is willing to work for people, because he could like just jump through it and cause a bunch of structural damage to the building and risk it collapsing, but he's thinking ahead, and that level of care and expertise that has to go into being a powerful man, metaphor, I think is very important.
I got one of the things that I found very interesting is, and this is really played out visually, and I'll get to it now. Is so he rescues this woman, and this is sort of like he first becomes known to the public when he sort of prevents this domestic incident, which could have turned into something much worse, even a potential murder. And he goes back. He clearly goes back to this woman at the bar, and this is what surprised me. Where I'm this further, it just sort of threw me for a loop. This is a woman that I think that he just met, that he had a fling at the bar.
Mhm.
It shows the next morning they're of course still passionately making love, but he clearly has confided in her everything about himself. She
Yeah.
knows all his superpowers. She knows what he can do. And so my question to you is, because I think that I don't know, like that is he shows an enormous amount of trust in Isa.
Yeah.
Her name is Isa. Again, his name is John. He shows an enormous amount of trust, and it's quite obvious that they are so close. My question is, or maybe this is an unfair question. I don't want to put you on the spot, and this might be something that might happen in future issues, but I'm thinking, boy, man, and maybe I'm an old cynical bastard, but you're putting your trust in this woman you just met. You just confided a secret like that to someone that you just met and that you had a fling with. She's beautiful. She's gorgeous. She's the love of your life. I'm wondering if there's going to be a price he pays for that. But she seems to be like a really, really nice woman. And
Yeah.
so what was your thought process on that?
Well, there are a couple layers to it. I mean, one, this character he has no superhero name, throughout the course of the first issue. Like I mean, it's not too much of a spoiler, but he has a sort of press outing with the mayor, and the mayor's like, "What's your name?" He's like, "My name is John Prufrock." He's like,
Yeah.
"That's not marketable. What are you doing?" So he gives his real name to the public, right? Like, which gives
Yeah.
everybody access to his life. So a part of it was I wanted to pull away a little bit from the tropes of the genre that were distracting from what we're trying to accomplish here in telling a story about a man. So part of that was like, I don't think we need the added stress of the secret identity. Like, I just don't think it's necessary in this situation for the story that we're trying to tell. In the same way that like, we don't need a big universe of superheroes to let John go on the journey that he's going on. So there are certain things that like I'm embracing and certain things that I've decided that I emphatically don't need. Another part of this is when we're dealing with the performative nature of masculinity, what great and powerful man would want to hide his identity from people? Like who would not want people to be like, yes, this is me. Like this guy, like, hey, like you bullied me in middle school. I'm fucking Superman now. Like, you know, like who wouldn't want people to know that? If I was Superman, I would certainly want people to know I was Superman.
Well, I guess that goes into that sort of what you were talking about, and when I first interviewed you about Rise, about sort of like, you know, this was going to be something that was going to move away from the tropes of the standard typical superhero genre, because it is true. I mean, it's you know, why not reveal your identity? What are you trying to hide? And you know, I get that. I guess it's a reflection of the cynical nature of all of us, and I think that in and of itself, and that's what stood out for me is that the fact that John didn't do that. That John not only, upon meeting, you know, love at first sight, the woman of his dreams, he opens up to her so completely. He shares who he is so completely. That's something, and to do it with the city as well. It wasn't just. It wasn't his openness, not only to her, but the entire city. That I found was particularly vulnerable. He's showing some vulnerability there. And what I found so interesting is that I thought that, so that alpha male, that first impression I have of him of being like sort of an alpha male, I half-ass expected him to be, you know, sort of like a sailor with a woman in every port. No, right. Quite the contrary. This was not it at all. I'm wondering if, you know, now I got all these questions, you know, was he checking her out for a while? Was just, you know, like, is there what other kind of secrets does he have? What other expectations are going to be shattered here? And what's the background of John? How did he get his powers? None of those questions are answered in this first issue, but I'm intrigued enough by you know, the insecurity that he seems to have, but at the same time, the strength that you got to have a strength of character to put yourself out there like John does in this issue. You really do, because you know they talk about men nowadays. You know, there's a crisis of men. There's a crisis of men and dating and women in general. And how many women have the ability and the confidence to do what John does here? I mean, leaving aside the superpowers and the vulnerability he shows. Yet he wouldn't have to show the vulnerability he does. But I was, I was, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think, you know, it gives away a little bit of sort of my philosophy on masculinity, but I think that knowing when and how to be vulnerable and open and honest with people is just as important. You know, it is a little bit of a zag on, I think, traditionalist, conceptions of masculinity and like the stolid sort of stone-like man. Like I think, you know, that is also an important thing. And frankly, like a key element to this book, and to the general sort of like broad theme is exploring the relationship and the dynamic between masculinity and sort of the feminine touch and the feminine association, and how those two things play with each other, and ultimately, obviously, it leaning into him and his journey, how that affects him as a man. And so, yeah, I feel like that's vital, right? I think there's a number of people who just have women in their lives that impacted them and changed them, but also, you know, like wives, girlfriends, daughters, sisters, aunts, you know, who being a woman very specifically impacted them in their perception of the world. Like I was raised by a woman, you know what I mean? Like that affected me in a big way. And so, yeah, that's going to be a major part of this book going forward is that intimacy and that vulnerability as a man.
I think, and not to, I'll get a little bit personal with you, reflecting back your own words at the beginning of Rise. You talk about your own experience, and I thought you said something that was quite revealing about yourself as a writer that I think very clearly plays through in the story itself about John. You say in the introduction to Rise, and I'm just gonna read the quote, and I'll have you elaborate on it because I think it's very telling. You say, I didn't grow up with a real male guidance figure to teach me how to square up with life, how to be a good man. What I did have was someone who showed me what not to be. And that's tragic that that's the case. There's a sadness to that, that's your own reflection, but yet clearly it sounds as if you did learn something, and you did learn something from a bad example, I guess. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean that is the case. You know, I think it's just as much of a strength on what I did have. You know, like what I did have was like a really strong mom,
Mm.
who cared and who gave me everything she could. And in the absence of that healthy father figure, I had that type of nurturing, and that's sort of, you know, taught me how to be the man that I am now. And I still have questions about the man that I want to be in the future, but I know that a lot of my strengths do come from that and that recognition. And yeah, that is kind of one of the several pieces of me that you'll find woven throughout the course of this book and John's story.
Yeah. Uh, and that's a good segue into another aspect of this story that I just think was just, I thought it was brilliant in how you incorporated it, and that is dealing with the nature of John's powers here, and it deals with with the neurotransmitter hormone called dopamine. I had to Google this because I heard of dopamine. I started working out about a year and a half ago, and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I did actually have a preconception of what dopamine was, but I just read it has to do with movement, memory, and pleasure, and it's a neurotransmitter and hormone, and various activities that make us happy or relax can increase our dopamine levels. And John here, while cooking some bacon and eggs for Isa, the woman that he passionately confronted in the opening chapter of this comic, he makes a point of telling her that his dopamine levels have an impact on his powers. And one of the comments that on that cover A, the background of those round circles, that those make an appearance throughout the issue, and it was apparent. And as again, a compliment to your collaboration with the artist Ryan Best and the colorist Fabi Marquez. Great job on that, because it was clear every time he used his powers, you could tell that it looked like two bones, human bones, coming together, and that there was the little dots were representing dopamine. Did I get that? Am I interpreting that right, or could you?
So you're getting there. Yeah,
Okay,
so that's the synaptic cleft. So that is the space between two neurons and the exchange. So you got the dopamine right. That is where dopamine is exchanged between neurons, and that signal propagates throughout the system or the body. And so, yeah, those are basically the ends of two neurons communicating and transmitting dopamine to propagate that signal. And we use that constantly as a motif to not only explain like John's emotional state, but how that's going to affect him physically.
I got to tell you, because as I'm actually trying to figure that out, and because I'm rereading it and I'm going back and I keep flipping back to how fast he ran out of that bar after he finished making love to Isa in the bathroom, how fast he flew out of that bar. I'm thinking that's because of the dopamine.
Yeah.
All that pleasure after having the big O. He probably was on overdrive. He can run faster than the Flash after having that woman in the bathroom. Holy moly. But that's the first thing I thought about. That's exactly what that was. I love that. But I also thought he uses up his dopamine too fast, because he almost runs out of it, it seems, because he can't quite make it to the top of the building there on the next scene. So very clearly, immediately, and again, I have more of an appreciation of the opening scenes and the action as the story's told. I can fill in the blanks more, and then also have a more appreciation of the cover. So there's nothing. That's why I enjoyed reading this, because there's nothing better than when you read a comic and then you can flip back and say, oh, well, that's what that was. And you can go back and say, okay, now it's sort of like, it makes me appreciate the scene more. It's like, so that makes a lot of sense. But so now what I find interesting about it is there's so much you can do with this, because And again, I don't want to go too far. You mentioned that at one point there's a fire that John goes to confront, and and he rescues a person from a fire, and you say it's a beautiful scene, but it's also reflective too of his powers, how the limitations on his powers, that he it's clear that he can die. It's clear that he can be injured and harmed, and how he overcomes it. And there's a relationship between his state of mind and the use of his powers. And that's what I really like, and that shines through. And I honestly, in the hands of a lesser artist, I don't think that would have worked, quite frankly. I don't want to name names, but I could rattle off a whole slew of artists that wouldn't be able to do that. So my question to you is, how long did it take your collaboration with Ryan Best, the artist here, to was that, how collaborative was that process to sort of convey that, that relationship between the dopamine hit levels and the scenes that you wanted to convey?
I mean, so the nice thing is that Ryan is just inherently such a great storyteller on his own that it's generally pretty easy to communicate. And I had a very specific idea of how we wanted to render it. But what was great was Ryan seamlessly entered those elements into the page layout and made them look cool. Like, I was afraid that it was going to come off like a freaking science textbook, and he found these really cool like visual elements to inset those panels, because I've written them almost exclusively as inset panels, like they're interruptions of the wider panel as a whole happening most of the time, because I wanted them to run a little bit concurrently, right? Like he's having this moment connecting with her, like, and just being happy, and like he's just excited to be around her, and then you, like, on that page, like literally on that panel, you have the show, the expression of the dopamine being transmitted. So I mean, that was seamless. And we always, like, Ryan and I, before we even got started, were very conversational about the core of the story and what we were doing and why, and about how there are the things that we're leading with. And generally I like to lead with the emotionality, but also like exploring and visually explaining the impact of intimacy and touch and connection on this man, and how that impacts his ability to go superhero about. So, I mean, Ryan just, he makes it easy, if I'm honest.
Yeah, one of the things that there was a surprising amount of emotion. I can't tell you how surprised I was when I got to the scene where, well, I want to be careful because I don't want to give away all aspects of the story. So I'll just say this, that as I said before, that alpha male guy, that I judged this guy in the first page. I judged him on the first page. I said, this is an alpha male guy. This is what badass alpha male with superpowers. He's gonna bang a girl. He's gonna dump her. He's gonna have some fun. I was wrong on that totally. This guy is surprisingly vulnerable, expresses his emotions, is open to a woman that he just met. He's not afraid to profess his love for her. He reveals his secrets to her. And he's open to the city, doesn't have a secret identity. He's putting himself out there. And that's exactly the type of person that so many people are afraid of being. I mean, we're told all the time. I mean, it's a cliche. We're told about, express yourself, just be yourself, but so many people are afraid of it. It's like Marianne Williamson said, she has a wonderful phrase. She said, it's not our darkness that we fear, it's our light. And here's a guy that comes along, and he's bringing every aspect of who he is, his strongest self he's showing. And there was a moment here that when, here's a guy who he leaves, he left the bar abruptly. And then the next morning he's with Isa and he wants to stay with Isa. Clearly he's loving his relationship with her. They just started it. And then he's called, he can hear that there's a fire going on somewhere, and he's inclined to let the firemen handle it. And and she scolds him. You know, how could you do that? You know, you're so close. How can you even contemplate not going to potentially help? Why let firemen do it? They could get hurt. Anyways, that moment, and then when he goes and he feels so guilty and he was able to help, and he feels so guilty having doubted himself. I thought he was, honestly, I thought he was way too hard on himself. This guy is so hard on himself. And I felt like I was actually pissed off at the character, at his girlfriend. So I was talking into the comic saying, "You're so hard on this guy. Give him a break." You know, but it plays into the character, and it plays so well because, you know, again, I know I'm doing a lot of the talking here, but I got to tell you, it made sense because. And I got to credit Ryan Best here does a great job of showing it. And you talked about it, the image where he's in the fire and he saved a woman that would not have been able to be saved by the fireman. He had to be the one to do it. And why did he do it? Because he's the only one who can. And that's where I think that's it. It clearly, this is his moment where he realizes, oh my God, I really am unique. I'm different. I have abilities others don't, and it really hits him. And there's a transformation of this character in this first issue, and that's why I love the substance. And I said before, I started off this interview with you saying, I'm a sucker for a good metaphor. This comic in the first issue is riddled with metaphors. It's on all 4 covers. You got different emotional states on the 4 covers that we talked about. We got a visual representation of the dopamine, which is the foundation of his powers. We see the results of what happens with the dopamine and his moods, and it's related to what his movement, his memory, his pleasure that he experiences has an impact on the degree of his powers. It's all here. So, again, man, compliments. And I haven't, there's still an ending to this. We haven't even touched on how this issue ends, and we're not going to, because people listening, pick up Rise #1. This is absolutely something that I would recommend. You talked about this being 4 issues in the introduction, I believe it was, or in the end. What is that still the plan, or what's the plan for how many issues it's going to be?
Yeah, I think 4 or 5. I in the beginning, I didn't really consider how much time I needed to flesh out some of like the emotional and psychological elements and a little bit of the context behind this character and his past. I was thinking it was going to move a little bit faster. And because I got a little stressed out because, like, I mean, you and I met simply by talking about superhero comics. And I just remember sometimes, like, month to month, some stories just being unbearable because there's not enough, like that. Not enough has happened. And then I got to wait a month and pay like another $5 or $6 and still barely anything happens sometimes. You know what I mean? So that was such a big thing for me. And I was just like, I got to keep it moving. Like, shit's got to be happening all the time. And it can't just be cool. Like, it's got to be impactful. It's got to speak to the story and this character's journey as a hero. And so as I kind of got into working on issue 2, I was like, there is no way I can like wrap this up in 3 in a satisfying way, which was my original plan. Yeah. But they're all going to be oversized issues. They're all probably going to be between 32 and 40 pages. First issue's 40, second issue's 34. So sizable. But yeah, I'm thinking probably 4 or 5 at this point. Like, I'm writing issue 3 right now. And I was like, as I get through it, I'm like, oh, there is no way I would have ended it at this issue. And I'm so glad that I had the foresight to not go like 1 of 3 at the beginning when I started doing the trade dress for issue 1, because that would have been a monumental disaster. But yeah, so I'm thinking 4 or 5 of these oversized issues. It'll look like, when all's said and done, probably like 170 to 200 pages worth of stories.
When you get near the end of the first issue, you tease the Kickstarter that's starting this month, starting next week for issues 2, and the actual one of the ads reads, what would happen if you had to feel good to do good? And we just finished talking about the dopamine aspect of John's superpowers. He literally does have to feel good or some degree of pleasure or goodness in order to maximize his powers and be able to use them. And it really makes one wonder what happens when John feels really, really bad. Well, does he lose his powers? Does he not? It's a tease of what will come. I'm thinking in future issues because I'm thinking, right now, we're in the middle of, people are always talk about mental health and everything else, and the crisis of young men in terms of what is it to be a young man in today's society, and the things that just men are up against, young boys and into men, and just the state of mind, and what happens if, there's a metaphor there. We're the best that we can be, but we can only be, we're only as good as our state of mind. So what does one have to do to stay positive? We don't need to have superpowers to know that can be a difficult thing to do. And so my question to you is, can you give any, even from a thematic point of view, can you give any teasers about what we can expect for the adventures of John moving forward into issue 2?
Yeah, as you had mentioned earlier, throughout the course of issue 1, he goes through a pretty extreme transformation, and so there are certain things that he learns to use as a source of joy, and as a source of hyping himself up effectively. And there is a fairly significant time skip between issue 1 and issue 2. I think by the time you get to the end of issue 2, about a year and a half has passed, and you pick back up, and I believe issue 2 is like 9 months after that. So he's been a hero for 2+ years. He's figured himself out a little bit more. And I think one of the key things we communicated in one of the scenes just after the fire was how good he feels by being embraced by the people of his city. And even so far as further, as he's racing towards something at the end of this first issue, he stops several times along the way to help people. And that was sort of us trying to communicate that this is a changed man who has learned to take a lot of, not necessarily pleasure, but like a lot of, I guess, comfort and pride in doing what he does and taking care of people because he has the power to do it. Um, and so that becomes such a major factor in this character's psychology. Like, not to go too spoilery, but in issue 2, you find out he makes a pretty awful mistake, and the way he copes with it is by he develops like an addiction to saving people. Like he just runs around the world for an entire night, like completing these insane feats of strength uh, to cope with his guilt, And so we're kind of trying to explore some pretty interesting outlets for.
That's it. Yeah, that sounds interesting. It sounds like it's almost like he needs to maintain a dopamine high in order to stay powered so he can help people. It's like a never ending cycle. It's almost like an addiction cycle of a kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Like I say, man, I'm a sucker for a good metaphor. When they're well done in a comic book, count me in. So, before we go, I'm on the Kickstarter page. I'm showing the Kickstarter page, which is the Kickstarter promotion for issues 2. And so everybody, I'll leave the link below when this is posted on YouTube. And I got to tell you, man, looking at this page. I spoke with you before we started this interview, but a gorgeous Kickstarter page. Tell me about this image that John on the cover of this Kickstarter page.
Yeah, so this is from the B cover to issue 2, and one of the things we obviously explore is sexuality and the relationship of sexual. It's not even just the intimacy per se, but like physical sexuality and intimacy, how those play a role in a man, and not only his consideration of himself, but how he physically is feeling. And dopamine, as we've implied and as is like scientifically proven, spikes really hard after sexual climax. You see it in the beginning of issue 1 where he takes that massive leap and speeds out of the building. But this sort of represents the hold that his relationship with sex and how it affects him might have over him, and how it might manipulate him. And so we got to do this almost horror centric cover with the amazing Steph C, who did the B cover of issue A as well, with the cape sort of wrapping around him in the shadow of the woman. So we're exploring very similar themes, but in a very different fashion. And yeah, I think this piece came out super cool, and it's maybe arguably the most identifiable out of this cover lineup for this issue.
Yeah, it looks really good. And again, we're looking at. I'm on the Kickstarter page. We're looking at. We just finished discussing what's cover B for issue 2. I'm assuming this is cover A for issue 2,
Correct.
where he's got it. He's once again he's got the circles above him, which are the same circles that are symbolic. They usually contain reference to his level of dopamine that gives him his powers, and then. In this case, we have, I guess, is that a battering ram bone?
It's a ram skull, yeah.
The ram skull, yeah, above his head. And is that, forgive my ignorance, what is that symbolic of? I mean, I could sort of guess, but...
Yeah, in several cultures, it's very much the symbology of fertility and force. And, in this image, John has like the physique of a bodybuilder. Like, if you look at, and you can see it on the screen, like the A cover from issue 2, like he's jacked, but there's nothing that's like proportionally bigger than anything else. In this form, he's stronger than ever. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's fiercer than ever. And yet you have the ram skull, which is like it's representing some type of loss, some type of death to him as a person, as a man, right? Like he's stronger than ever, but maybe there's a part of his masculinity that it's not that's not up to par with everything else. And so there's sort of where that storytelling comes in. And again, the A covers all connect. So you're going to be able to line them up on a wall, and they're all going to kind of interact with one another, which will be really cool.
That's awesome. So we'll have an eagle, and then a ram's head, and then maybe another we'll have maybe different animals in the other covers. Am I guessing?
I'll give any like long-term reader of mine a hint. It is an animal that I had used as a motif several times in my first series. And that's all I will say.
Oh, okay. Right on. Well, thanks for the tease. Cover C here. This looks really interesting, by Vincenzo Ricardi.
Yeah.
That looks absolutely gorgeous. I really like that. That's really different. That's visually different. I love the cape. I love the image in the cape. It's what it hints at.
He's amazing. He's so good. He's so damn good. And like he's been murdering the variant cover game for like Boom and Vault and IDW, and I was just like overjoyed when I got to lock him on to do something, and he gave me 3 really cool designs, but like this one really spoke to me. And again, like I'm big on the narrativity of a cover, and one of the things I don't want to spoil it, but this cover communicates a lot about how there's something important in his life that becomes the fuel by which he needs to burn in order to be super. And that becomes a complication because that thing was once a major part of his strength. So this cover just kind of distills that in such a beautiful, almost psychedelic way, but not so much that you don't lose the humanity. I mean, the expression on John's face in the primary figure is just like, it's beautiful. I love this piece. I remember when I got it, when I saw it for the first time, and I just like lost my mind when I saw it finished. I knew we had gone through all the rough sketches and like the basic color blocking, and this one just blows me away.
Well, did Ricardi also do the colors himself, or because he did the whole thing?
Yeah, he did the whole thing. So if a different colorist colors a cover, they'll be credited right there in the subtitle description. But actually, all of the cover artists colored their own cover.
Okay, right on. So now we have it looks like a cover D and cover. I guess cover D here looks really good. The secret variant, not so secret if we're seeing it. I apologize, it's not as large as I would like for people to see, but it looks like it's a double covers 2 pages. Wow, you know what? The last time, kudos to all your artists, what they do with the cape. And the last time I saw, I don't see that type of creativity with a cape, and I got to go to a Spawn to pick up a Spawn comic because I really like the use of the cape on these covers. It's really nice. It's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
I appreciate it. Ryan, the running joke with Ryan is that like he's low key becoming an amazing cape guy. Like he had never done a superhero book before, and he's just taken so much pride in the capes. I mean, even look at the original A cover, like how majestic and textured it is, and like on the interior of the book. I mean, he also did the A cover for issue 1, which is sort of on the outline of the uh, our frame for
Or
this
frame, yeah,
video meeting. But
yeah,
like he's just gotten so damn good with capes, and so there are certain moments actually even in the interior of the book, like in issue 2, he's addressing a crowd, um, and I think one of my description was, Ryan, do your thing, like work your magic. I need some cool cape shit. And so he does. And like you'll notice on the interior of the book, especially in issue 2 and going forward, we actually sort of use like the shape and the framing and the directionality of the cape to imply a lot about his emotional state. Like it's a part of his body. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you have the body language of his physical form, but the cape very much becomes a big part of that because I think that's a cool part of the superhero iconicity.
yeah.
So like if Norm Brayfogle was the Batman cape guy, then like I think Ryan Best is cementing himself as like the Superman archetype cape guy in a big way.
Yeah, no, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, that covered Rise number 2, cover C by Vincenzo Ricardi, and cover D cover D by Ryan Best. Man, they're really good. But I got to tell you, cover E by Ryan Shumate. Shumate, did I say that right?
I think it's Shumate, but
Shumate. Okay,
we've only ever corresponded via messages, like
Shumate.
email
Yeah.
and like text messages. So I
Yeah.
think it's Shumate. I'm pretty sure.
It's Shumate, yeah. This another gorgeous cover. This is really cool. It reminds me. His style reminds me of Jay Lee a little bit. He does a lot of
Hmm.
Dynamite covers, but it's again really good. I just yeah, eye popping.
Yes. So that one, the e cover is actually a stretch goal cover. So if the campaign passes 10K, we're going to unlock that cover for you. And further, we have a backer goal where if the campaign hits 300 backers,
Hmm.
we're going to make that a foil cover for free. We're upgrading it to foil without any upcharge for anybody
Right,
that gets that cover. And
awesome.
I think also there's a stretch goal to take Ryan Best, our interior artist, his wraparound cover, and
Yep,
add a really cool spot gloss to it.
nice. That's awesome. So you talked about your stretch goals here. I guess you've already sort of stated some of them. If you hit $10,000, you're going to have Ryan Shumate, Shumate, the variant cover. E will be unlocked, and there's a free Rise sticker for all physical backers. If you surpass 12,500, and if you pass $15,000, upgrade a wraparound cover D with spot gloss, as you said. Man, I for people listening, this is well worth the investment. And people talk about the cost of comic books. For the big two, which frankly, in my view, are having a problem with quality for a number of years now. To be polite about it. I really hope I encourage people to give Rise a shout out, not only because you're an up and coming writer, and I still insist that at some point in the future, in the next 10 years, I want you to be signing the Batman story you write. But just to support, because I do think this is worth it, and just the themes and the thought that you put into it, I really think it shows, and I think if people I encourage people watching to give this a shot. Go to Kickstarter. The link will be below. Give this support Rise. Number one already came out, but you can get a digital copy. I assume do you still have copies left of number one?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I
Yeah.
always overprint because I want to make sure people have the chance to catch up on following issues. So
Yeah.
we are, I think we did like 2,500-ish physical copies for Rise #1. So
Yeah.
it's a decent print run. We're definitely going to have enough for people who pick up issue 2, and actually, like, there are bundles, like you can save a little bit of money catching up. But if you want to pick and choose like what variants you want, we'll have all of the issue 1 variants and the add-ons. Like if you click, there should be like a reward section. If you scroll down slightly, oh, I guess because it's a preview, maybe it won't pop up. Oh no, it does. It does pop up, right? Rewards.
Um,
It says campaign and then rewards and then something else right there. No, you passed it.
oh, campaign rewards.
Yep. If you
Uh,
click rewards.
click that.
Yep. Nope.
Uh,
So go down just a touch to your left. I think it's
oh,
see where
here. All right. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Here we go. Okay. Nothing's
Oh,
popping up there.
huh.
Maybe it's because maybe it's because it has to be.
Full screen or something.
I don't know. It
Huh.
says rewards. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
it should be it's weird. I guess anyhow,
well, it's not live. Maybe it's because it's not live yet.
I don't maybe that's possible. But I guess just to explain, yeah, so you'll be able to grab copies of issue 1. We've got various bundles and such for those of you who want to catch up. And yeah, a bunch of other cool stuff. Like if you scroll down, we have some examples of art commissions from Ryan that he did for the previous Kickstarter campaign. So you can grab a traditional piece of hand-drawn art from our incredibly talented artist. As you can see here, triple page spread in issue 1, which is just like one of the coolest things I think I've ever seen in a book that I've made. But and then a little bit of teaser inks at issue 2.
That's awesome. Definitely
But
whets the
yeah,
appetite.
yeah, so as you can see here, you've got options to get fully colored pieces, just inked pieces. This guy's giving you basically a comic book cover on a commission for next to nothing. So,
Yeah.
um, and we've got them available at so many different like sizes. So if you're international and you're worried about having a big package, you can get a smaller one that fits inside the Gemini, so it's not crazy for shipping. Or if it's just a financial concern and you want a really cool piece of Ryan Best art without breaking the bank, well, then he's got a couple different size options for you. But like I said, the cool thing is issue 1 has 2 fold out triple page spreads. Like you're going to pull that. It's going to be like a poster sized image inside of your comic, which I'm super, super stoked about. Um,
That's awesome.
but yeah, and you can catch up on my back catalog. So if you are just coming to encounter me, we have my first series, Area 51, The Helix Project, and my recent collection of short stories, Minutes to Midnight, The Hour Between Life and Death. And I think they're pretty good. So I hope you consider adding those to your box. But if you're a digital reader and don't want to deal with the physical media, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have my entire digital catalog, including these 2 issues of Rise, for like $25. It's like $25 or $27. So it's over 300 pages worth of comics, super high res, a bunch of behind the scenes material
Mm.
for like nothing. So you're paying, what is that? Like less than, is it a penny per page? Like it's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also like that you have a whole section here dealing with you guys, the creatives. More information about yourself, as well as interior and cover artist Ryan Best, your colorist Fabi Marquez, letterer Matias Zanetti, letterer, and yeah. So, man, well, we covered a lot of ground here. This is, I'm I enjoyed issue 1. How did you? I'm looking forward to issue 2. Any final thoughts? Any final commentary on people who might be interested in checking Rise out?
Well, I mean, I hope you give it a look. I think, maybe in honor of this, we'll leave when the time of this, when it's time to produce this video, maybe I'll collaborate with Rocky on giving you guys a little tease of Rise issue 1. We'll do like a sort of mini teaser of that first issue and throw a download link in the comments for those of you who are curious that want to get a little bit more of an idea of what this story is about and what we're bringing to the table. But he and I will talk about that probably once we get off the recording. Just as a thank you for those of you who are tuning into the interview and consider checking us out. We're we're putting so much into this book in terms of like care and effort. You know, I mean, Rocky now has known me for years, and I think he and some of his audience who remember me from the good old days might know I never thought I would be doing a superhero book, and I put so much scrutiny into my approach in wanting to make sure that this is truly different and not different for the sake of being combative or controversial or shocking, different in insofar as telling a unique story, the type that has not been told in this genre, which is hard after 85 years of constant inundation and periodical material, right? And now you have multimedia getting invested in this genre and these characters. I truly believe we're doing something different. We are swinging for the fences in a big way. I would not be doing this story if I didn't feel like we were adding something to the zeitgeist. And you know, even if not for the story, I'm working with some of the most talented people in comics, bar none. Not the big two, not anything. And so at bare minimum, you're going to have some damn good stuff to look at. So I really, really hope you consider giving it a look. We are by far one of the most cost-effective options in crowdfunding comics, and we do not sacrifice on the quality. Some of the best print material on the platform. You're getting a 40-page issue one with 2 triple-page foldouts. You can get it for as low as $10, where I think a lot of my competitors on the platform are selling like a 20 to 22-page comic for 12 to 15. I believe in the quality of the product, and I believe that if you give it a shot, you will find it worth the value and hopefully tell someone else. But I hope you back this book. I hope you tell somebody about it if you think it's worth your time. And man, Rock, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for sharing your space with me and letting me talk about this story, which means a lot to me.
Well, I want to give you a compliment because I want to say that I've more so you than even Jace, who I review DC comic books every week. Jace has become a great friend. You've become a very good friend. Just the language. I remember when we first met. Despite I've got some years on you, a couple decades at least, and dare I say that I learned the language of comics more from you and I think I became a better reviewer because of our conversations and the way that you articulate yourself. You also were very good at putting together review videos, if I recall. But the fact that you went into comic books and writing comic books, I say this with no hyperbole. I think we're all the better for it, and I'm looking forward to more of reading what you produce, my friend.
Man, it's a privilege to be able to hear that, and I'm excited. I think we've got a lot of fun stuff coming.
How's your dopamine level? How's your dopamine? Dopamine's going high now?
It's like, but I'm excited. We're pushing ourselves, and I've been pushing myself since day one to tell better and better stories and to do them in different sandboxes and build different castles with them, to poke at core elements of the human condition. And I'm privileged to be in a situation where people want to talk about them and read them and to work with the people that I do. So thank you, man. It's that means a lot to hear.
All right. And with that, I will tell everyone again, encourage everyone to check out the link below. Check out the Kickstarter for Rise issues 1 and 2. There'll also be, if you check out the Kickstarter, there'll be links there for Minutes to Midnight and also Area 51, Helix Project, all of which are projects of Trevor Fernandes-Lenkiewicz. It only took me a number of years, but I figured out how to say my friend's name properly and pronounce it correctly. So without further ado, thank you, Trevor. Thank you for those that are listening. And Comic Boom, out.